Three, two, one. Welcome to the Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze Emo Extravaganza History Lesson. My name is Alan, making up for a long-lost promise. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the history of emo, kind of a drop in an ocean of history, if you will. So to start us off, I'm actually going to take us here to this Reddit post entitled Real Emo. This thing is very famous among the emo crowd, and especially if you're emo under the age of 35, you've probably heard this, but I'm gonna read it now. Real emo only consists of the DC emotional hardcore scene of the late 90s screamo scene. What is known by Midwest emo is nothing but alternative rock with questionable real emo influence. When people try to argue that bands like My Chemical Romance are not real emo, while saying that Sunny Day Real Estate is, I can't help not to cringe because they are just as fake as My Chemical Romance. Plus the pretentiousness. Real emo sounds energetic, powerful, and somewhat hateful. Fake emo is weak, self-pity, and a failed attempt to direct energy and emotion into music. Some examples of real emo are PG-99, Rites of Spring, Cap'n Jazz, the only real emo band from the Midwest scene, and Loma Prieta. Some examples of fake emo are American Football, My Chemical Romance, and Mineral. Emo belongs to hardcore, not to indie, pop punk, alt-rock, or any other mainstream genre. So if you could get any sentiment from this cringy-ass Reddit post, it is that people don't really understand what emo is, people don't agree, and kind of through the generations that we're going to be speaking about from the 1980s up until today, whether or not a band wanted to be known as emo really varied, kind of depending on the time and the context. So as stated by this amazing post, we are going to start in Washington, D.C. in the 80s, but to further illustrate, I want to show you this website called isthisbandemo.com. Hopefully, based on that name, you could be able to figure out what the function of this website is, but if you ever have a question, is this band emo? Is Death Cab for Cutie an emo band, for example? Death Cab for Cutie is an emo band, and they even mention Kath. We can try Kanye West, and we can see that Kanye West is not an emo band. Thank you, isthisbandemo.com. I had been wondering that myself. The council will never let him finish. There you go. So, just to give you that first little piece of context, all of this is subjective. All of what is or is not emo is open to change, open to your interpretation, and really whether or not the band says they are or are not emo has shown to be irrelevant over the years, but we'll get into that. One thing to note is that I'm going to be dividing these eras into what are called waves. Think of this as a roughly 10-year span where a song that I'm going to show you kind of encapsulates a very wide and diverse genre, but just know that I picked these songs to show you just because they are what I consider the best representation of a wide, very diverse genre. One song is never going to give you enough context to fully understand the sounds there. So we're going to start with the first wave, which I've called the DC emotional hardcore scene, which we're going to call the late 1980s. Okay, so as promised, I wanted to start us here in the late 1980s with a band called Rites of Spring. When I play this song, For Want Of, which is going to be one of their biggest songs of all time, one of the most famous songs of this era, I want you to look at 341,000 views. You can tell that when people are being very elitist about this is the time of emo that is real. This is what the genre really was meant to represent. Its popularity wasn't really that wide, and ultimately it kind of dooms me to not think of this as the peak of the genre, as some elitists might want you to think about. One thing I would say, though, is listen to the stylistic influence. I think you're going to hear immediately the punk influence. You're going to immediately hear the, I guess, a little bit of a metal influence. But what you're not going to hear is anything grungy or anything that you think of when you think of a band like My Chemical Romance. So I'll pause Donkey Kong here. I'll give you a little bit of For Want Of by Rites of Spring.
Probably mine. Well, my turn to see. If there's nothing here, it'll always be mine, mine. I woke up this morning with a piece of glass caught in my throat, and then I choked. I guess I've learned the taste of the days that will always burn.
So, when I was talking a little earlier about the real emo copy pasta, talking about how this is the real only emo, I just wanted to bring one thing to your attention. The singer of this band, Rites of Spring, is a guy named Guy Picciotto. And Guy would actually say in a 2003 interview that he doesn't count emo as a real genre. He doesn't think that it's any kind of signifier of real music. And that is just the seeds of why this was never going to be a genre label that really worked on any level whatsoever. In 1985, Thrasher magazine would coin the term emo core for this band as well as certain other bands of this era. But as cheesy as the term emo core sounds now, that only lasted about 2 years. And by the end of the 1980s, the term emo mostly had disappeared, at least from this punk sense. And we're going to go away from the East Coast, away from Washington, D.C. here. And in the 1990s, we're going to actually head over to Seattle, and we're going to take a look at what is called the second wave of emo, or what is more commonly known as Midwest emo. I really want to give a quick shout out to, are we on here? You can't really read this book, but this is a book called Sellout by Dan Ozzi, and it's a history of emo and alt-rock, kind of post-Nirvana. And one of the theories that he actually posits is that when Kurt Cobain dies in 94, emo kind of springs out of grunge, especially out of Seattle. And we're going to see as the genre tends to get bigger and bigger through the 90s, it starts in Seattle and it starts to go down to the Bay Area, it starts to go down to San Diego with a band like Blink-182. And you're going to see kind of this very traceable post-grunge kind of expansion. But again, that all starts... Oh, sorry about that. That all is going to start with this Midwest emo, with this kind of period that I would call the 1990s. And we're going to start with a classic Seattle emo band called Sunny Day Real Estate, and this is their song called 7. I'm going to pull up here. So, one thing I want to draw your attention to about this song is you can see how cleanly it's produced. The guitar tones just sound a lot more well recorded than they did on the Rites of Spring song. You're going to really hear the first indie rock influence here. That guitar solo really was a lot more mainstream rock than you were going to get out of a punk album. So again, this is just one of the songs that I would encapsulate the early 90s, and when you really get that post-grunge sound. However, as kind of the 90s went on, we would get away from the heaviest sounds and we would get a little more into the twinkly kind of guitars that we would hear from more of the mainstream bands like a Third Eye Blind. We're going to actually get that with the more insular emo scene too. And I just want to say, this late 90s era, this second wave era, the emo elitists, this is probably the most popular time that people would say as real emo. It's what they would call the second wave. If there was a greatest emo song of all time, it is here. Hopefully you've heard this one. This is just Stairway to Heaven for emo kids. Never Meant by American Football. So at this point, it's probably a little jarring to think of the rough and punk influence sound of Rites of Spring, and then look at this, where we're getting what looks to be the most, well, to be honest, cliche teenager kind of music video vibe that I've seen. On top of this just sounding much more just sad, this is melancholy, versus the anger is gone. This is the vibe I much prefer, by the way. I kind of agree with the Reddit elitists on some level that this is really kind of the peak of what the genre was. This late 90s Midwest emo scene. I talked about it coming down from Seattle, but one thing I want to say is that American Football is just such an impactful band from this era, headed by a singer named Mike Kinsella, who is really much the genre's goat. In the early 90s, he was in a band called Cap'n Jazz, which some people say is the greatest emo band of all time. He would then go on to play in American Football, which now people say is the greatest emo band of all time. And whichever way you look at it, Mike Kinsella has just been the biggest influence on the genre as a whole through the time, and is just honestly one of the goats of the era and continues to be of this day. So huge shout out. If you want to know about emo, you can just look at Mike Kinsella's career. And there you go. All right, so this next section is the third wave of emo, typically categorized by the early 2000s time. Some of the big bands of this era are the biggest ones that you've probably heard of: Fall Out Boy, Blink-182, My Chemical Romance, Panic at the Disco. these bands that are kind of considered cliche now and got way bigger than any of the bands we've talked to up to this point. Oh, the bonus room is fire. This is going to be what you think of if you just talk to someone on the street and ask them what emo is. It's third wave during the 2000s. Today, people, when they think of this era, rightfully they think of the band My Chemical Romance because they influenced kind of the whole aesthetic, from the clothes they're wearing to the sound and the overall very, very dramatized, I would say, wearing black with super unafraid to be over-the-top lyrics. And that works really well. You can see that going full all out like that really has paid off now in 2024. Tickets for this band cost $600 if you wanted to go see My Chemical Romance now. Insane. But even before they came on the scene with their first album in 2004, or I should say their first breakthrough album, My Chemical Romance in 2004, the seeds were already sown. This is actually one of my favorite songs from this era before My Chemical Romance really came on the scene. This is called Hands Down by Dashboard Confessional. You can just hear how clean it is. They're just playing guitar, plugging it right in, and just playing the power chords like this would go out of style within a few years, but this just hits for me in a completely different way. So I die happy. Where is Julie? So that song came out. Dashboard Confessional is fucking goated in the scene, and this kind of very angsty teenage focus just catches on like wildfire, like none of the other genres of emo had before. And really, Dashboard Confessional, as much as I love them, and I love them more than My Chemical Romance, really the big dog, the LeBron James of the 2000s emo era. It's My Chemical Romance, and this is the song Teenagers that I just think when you ask me about a 2000s emo song, this is what I'm gonna say.
They're gonna clean up your looks with all the lies in the books to make a citizen out of you. Because they sleep with a gun and keep an eye on you, son, so they can watch all the things you do. Because the drugs never work, they gonna give you a smirk, cause they got methods of keeping you clean. They gonna rip up your heads, your aspirations to shreds, another cog in the murder machine.
Pay attention to how this band resonates. Their style is one of the biggest influences of this era.
They can care less as long as someone will bleed. So darken your clothes, I'll strike a violent pose. Maybe it'll lead you alone, but not me. The boys and girls in the clique, the awful names at the stick. You're never gonna fit in much, kid.
Remember how we started at Rites of Spring? Very, very unwelcoming to the outside. Look at how this is marketed to just every teenager now. This shit hit like you were being bullied. I'll do one more that hopefully you have heard of this era. This one's by a little band called Fall Out Boy you may have heard of. Look at that suburban ass music video.
Am I more than you bargained for yet? I've been dying to tell you anything you wanna hear, 'cause that's just who I am this week. Lie in the grass next to the mausoleum. I'm just a nut in your bedpost, but you're just a lot in a song. Drop a heart and break a name. We're sleeping and sleeping for the road team. We're going down, down in an early round, and sugar we're going down swinging. I'll be your number.
I don't know that this era is necessarily the best, but this is the one that I have the most nostalgia for. And when I talked about maybe Midwest emo is my favorite, I think this 2000s pop emo, now that I'm listening to a song like this, really just fucking gets me on a different level. So I think that one might actually be my favorite. But this was the 2000s. This was the peak. Fall Out Boy was doing their shit here. Like I mentioned, Panic at the Disco. But a commercial peak has to end. And when I talked about how My Chemical Romance was the band that kind of exploded the scene and is the band that, when you say emo today, you think of them. They actually fought up. They, ironically, just like Rites of Spring 20 years before did, My Chemical Romance didn't want to be called emo. They kind of just wanted to be a rock band. Their sound is much more inspired by Queen or by, like, the rock opera Tommy by The Who than it is like what Rites of Spring or whatever you would consider emo. But they got so popular and the label just kind of attached themselves that's what the genre became. That's what people think of now. So this third wave, the fake emo wave, as much as people want to discredit it, I think it is, I mean, it's at least the second most important era of the genre, and it's probably the first because it's the commercially most biggest, even if it's not like looked back in the most fond way by the super elitists or whatever. So moving on to Wave 4, which I very much classify as the 2010s. We're now 10 solid years away from this Fall Out Boy being the biggest thing on the planet. We're looking at genres like dubstep have taken over in the year 2012, 2013. And the genre was due for a little bit of a rediscovery. Specifically back to this era. So one of my favorites coming from the early 2000s was actually a band called Story So Far. Actually from Walnut Creek, California. I have a huge connection to how much these guys rep the Bay Area, but through the 2000s, or through the 2010s, this band really championed this very uncool sound for the genre, as kind of pop was really catching on, as rap even was, as the shittiest genre Mumford & Sons core was catching on. The Story So Far was bringing back just an amazing pop punk sound.
All that I know is your space is empty, very
been a part of my life for over 10 years, and seeing how much they changed along with the emo genre, and just like being from the Bay Area, how different all of this is about Okay, so story so far, this is one of the biggest bands from that era. I have another favorite band from the 2010s and the 2010s revival. Modern Baseball.
Hood.
Stop.
Take a look at how
We're
different of a
Modern
song this
Baseball.
is going to
This
be
song is called Play
from
Ball,
the story
and
so
it's
far,
off
what we
our
just
first
listened to.
line.
And we're going to see how different the genre has become.
Oh, these words were
Play ball.
thrown together when I still had my faith in hand. Kept it in my back pocket with the change I had to spare. Smooth the skies when it's night, let the stars be my sea breeze. I love when the record echoes, reminds me of the trees. But I shouldn't have to say this to you. No, you know how to live life. This compilation of sayings and tunes means everything
So,
to me now. Oh,
the guy on the left, Jake, is in a new band called Slaughter Beach Dog, and Brent on the right sort of just didn't want to be famous anymore, so Modern Baseball broke up in 2018. But seeing everyone look this young just really brings me back in a kind of nostalgic way. These last few videos have like really decreased the quality because I'm getting caught up in them. But Modern Baseball, incredible band, one of the biggest of this era. But even the revival of the 2010s had to come to a close. And as we're kind of looking back and other people are starting to get involved in the genre, and this kind of guitar-based, very rock-centric sound is starting to fade away again, emo hit us with another curveball. Juice WRLD unfortunately left us in 2018, but I really want to say Juice WRLD along with, I don't think X was ever that good, but XXXTentacion and Trippie Redd, Lil Peep. As rap got really, really big through the late 2000s and 2010s, some of those rappers looked back at My Chemical Romance and bands like that, and they were like, actually, that fucking slapped. Actually, those songs went hard. And created this amazing new emo trap genre. And I think one of the most, well, really the saddest, but one of the best artists of this genre was Juice WRLD. Kind of coming up on the SoundCloud scene through the mid-2010s and the early 2010s. Really peaking up right before his death, actually. Took a sound that was trap rap, which is rap from the South, and combined it with that emo sound that you hear today. So this is Black and White. This is one of his biggest songs. 225 million views. You can just see how far the genre has come.
I know that these packies finna hurt me. Sometimes I feel like they doing surgery. Tell me, are they working? Are they working? Tell me, are they working? I party too damn much, and you niggas can't keep up. I'm getting too fucked up.
So one thing here you'll see is that, like, the way they dress, their hair is much more, they literally are doing the My Chemical Romance, but not necessarily with the sound, but with the, like, visual vibe. So just more of a rap style.
Doing cocaine with my black friends. We'll be high as hell before the night ends. Yeah, we'll be high before the night ends. Before the night ends, switch up to the white bins. Doing codeine with my white friends. We'll be high as hell before the night ends.
looking at this music video, a lot of this shit back in the day would have kind of been embarrassing to put in a music video, but by the time we hit the late 2010s, all that kind of shame is gone, and I mean, with Juice WRLD, it ended in a really tragic way, and that so far emo trap has lost a lot of its founding members. So for the genre moving forward, I hope we can get past this, but yeah, that kind of leaves us, Juice died in 2018, and the biggest bands of the fifth wave revitalization are all past, which leaves us in this really nebulous zone. Where does the genre go now? Emo trap might have already peaked. They've kind of already lost their Kurt Cobain equivalent. So wherever the future holds for emo, the one thing we can say is that the genre is always changing and that we don't know what the future holds. Thank you for watching. This has been a very, very drop in the bucket of what is an amazing, amazing genre. And if you're still with me, I appreciate it. The bonus room song just ended, so I think that's my cue to dip as well. Peace.